Good morning, Revolution, everyone. Welcome to the show this week. My name is Taryn. We will be discussing today the topic of Mahmoud Khalil and the concept of uplifting democracy by defending dissent. This morning, we are joined by Rosanna in California, Anita in Florida, and Scott and Xavier out in Western New York. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And don't forget, at home, you are able to tune in and listen to us or watch us live every Friday at 10:30 in the morning Eastern on, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter/X, and even Twitch, actually. So we've started our Twitch stream. But before we begin today's topic, I want to encourage everyone who is tuning in to hit pause on the show, open up your cell phone, and call your representative and tell them to vote no on cloture and no on this bill that is coming through today from the Trump administration, a new budget. I know that people have been really active in calling their representatives, and I think today is the vote that's going to happen to see whether or not we give Donald Trump and Elon Musk a blank check to run the government for the next 6 months. So be sure to call your senators. You can just go ahead and Google White House switchboard and be asked to be connected with your senators. So please be sure to do that. But this morning, even though there's a lot going on in the world right now, we're going to be focusing on this case in New York of Mahmoud Khalil, who was a student at Columbia University. He's a Palestinian who came from Syria most recently. And he was involved with some of the student activities on Columbia's campus. I think he was like a negotiator for an occupation that they had briefly at Bernard, I think, a couple weeks ago. But he was specifically targeted by the Trump administration and by Marco Rubio's State Department. And basically, when he was coming home with his wife, who's 8 months pregnant, from an iftar dinner last week, he was confronted by DHS agents and basically taken into custody and whisked away to Louisiana, even though he is a green card holder. And so I think that's what we're going to be focusing a little bit on for this show. But first, I just want to do a quick roundtable discussion. Given all that's happening right now in the news, we were just talking about calling your senator to make sure that we don't give a blank check to these Republican MAGA freaks. We're hearing rumors that Trump is going to be I think it's not the Insurrection Act, but it's some other act which basically allows him to start rounding up people and putting them in internment camps again. The fact that they say that they're going to be closing down the Department of Education. They've already, I think, proposed firing up to 50% of the employees there. Why is it that we in the Communist Party are focused so much on this one case here at Columbia University in New York? Rosanna, could I go ahead and start with you? Why is Mahmoud Khalil's case so important right now?
Well, first of all, in our party, we have a history of that includes some of our members being put in jail just for thinking. That at the core of it, it was just for thinking. So I think that's one. The other really important thing is that it's a form of he's being used to silence us who are protesting. He's being used to get us scared. And what our reaction has to be, we have to defend him and we have to not be scared. Because if we become scared, then they win. And we can't allow that. And the other thing is that, when they come for one, they come for the rest of us. So we have to defend him. It's so important to do that. But most importantly is, we cannot allow this administration to silence our voices and take away our rights to free speech.
You're muted.
Thank you, Rosanna. We're going to touch on the party's specific history with this kind of crackdown a little bit later on in the show, but I wanted to give the question to Anita. Anita, you've worked in higher education before. Why does it seem like people are so concerned with what's going on near Columbia's campus? I mean, Columbia University is not a university that I think anybody on this show attended. I don't think a lot of our listeners attended. It seems to be sort of an elite spot. But why is it that we are so focused on this one particular case right now?
Well, Taryn, I hate to disabuse you of that notion, but I actually did graduate from Columbia University.
Oh, no!
So, I didn't spend any money but it really rang true to me because I lived in Columbia housing, just where Mahmoud was taken from. So it is very significant. It's a step. It's just a clear step toward authoritarianism. You know, Americans or people in the United States can look at what Musk is doing in different departments and stuff and think, well, that's just, cutting funds. But this is really a step that everyone recognizes as authoritarian and as a fascist move. And they're trying to shut down free speech, student speech on campus, and also academic speech, as you will talk about this Columbia letter. So they're really trying to put the kibosh on all academic speech, all free speech on campuses, and really silence people. So it's Mahmoud is a symbol of what could happen to anyone, and really intends to spark fear, as Rosanna said, in everyone.
Thank you very much, Anita. Okay, Scott, now I'm pushing the question to you. And in your backyard at Cornell University, actually, I think there was over a dozen students who were arrested this week or last
Yeah.
week for basically protesting against Tzipi Livni, who is the former prime minister of the state of Israel. So why is it that we seem to be so focused on this incident right now? What's going on our college campuses, and how does that really affect the rest of us? Unlike Anita, who might not have gone to Columbia University.
It does affect all of us because universities, like, there's this attempt to paint them as totally disconnected, from the people, from society at large, the ivory tower, whatever. And in certain cases, that's true, and sometimes they lean into that in ways that aren't great. But they're also hugely important parts of the vast collective process of producing knowledge and producing new ideas. They don't always work perfectly. They don't always work in the favor of the people. But there's a struggle right now that intensified around the encampments and the Palestinian solidarity movement last year about what universities should be. Should they be under the control of the right wing, of wealthy donors, of private corporations who fund their research centers, or should they be accountable to their students, to their communities, to the nation? And kind of this attack on the rights of Mahmoud Khalil is also tied to the threat of cutting vast amounts of federal funding from universities. Right now, 40% of basic research, that is research not connected to any immediate commercial application, just research for research, is funded by the federal government, especially in healthcare, health and public health, right? And that's the funding that's being threatened. So these crackdowns that we're seeing are part of imposing the ideological agenda of the fascist right. And it's also connected to an attempt to bring universities even more directly under the control of capital with no accountability to the people. So it's hugely important.
Yeah, no, Rosanna, I like what you said about how we can't allow this to scare us, And I think that what we have seen from Columbia University for over a year now has been them running scared. And it hasn't seemed to do anything for them in their benefit in terms of making inroads with the extreme right, making inroads with, Zionists and people like this. It seems as though every time they say, okay, yes, we will crack down on our students, there's someone standing there with a stick saying, oh, you're not cracking down hard enough on them, you better crack down harder. I mean, we saw this letter come out from the Trump administration, I think it was yesterday, which basically made a list of everything that Columbia University needed to do in order to be back in the government's good graces. And as a result of this, they went through and they actually started expelling and suspending students. They actually fired the head of UAW, I think it was 1728. I'll have to look that up. but the head of the graduate student workers who was actually planning on starting contract negotiations today. So why is it that you feel Columbia University, this really powerful institution with tons of money that trains all of the greatest elites and the children of the elites in this country, why is it that they are seeming to cower in the face of Donald Trump, as opposed to lean on all of their, prestige and actually stand up to the guy?
Because I think they just don't understand their power, first and foremost. And they don't understand the risk and that they're taking. The cowing down is it's the way to show the administration that they have power. And what we have to show is that they don't have the power. Resistance has to come from within and from all over the place. Otherwise, they win. And if you see suffering right now, you're going to see triple that, maybe quadruple that in the future. And I think the other thing is that the targeting of these colleges is because we know throughout history that youth make a difference when they rise up. They make fundamental change. They bring fundamental change through their activism. So that's another reason why they're targeting it. But I think that we have to flood Columbia University and all of those who went to the university, like Anita, as an alumni, organize the alumni and say, no, you cannot do this. You have to stand strong, because they're going to come. They could shut Columbia University down by the fact that they are cowing down on this. It's like somebody who blackmails you. They want more and more out of you each time. So it's a Columbia University should take note of that as well.
Right, for sure. Yeah, they've definitely had the opportunity and the time to come around to that, and yet it doesn't seem to be helping at all. Anita, as someone who's familiar with the university, why is it that you think that they're not standing up strong, and what kind of effect do you think this is going to have downstream on maybe public universities, like, for instance, the City University of New York, where I have gone to school? It's a public university, but they have already, for instance, they said, oh, at Hunter College, they were going to hire a scholar who was going to focus specifically on Palestinian issues. And suddenly you had the governor of the state of New York coming out and saying, oh my goodness, you better get rid of this job posting. And they did right away. They dropped it. So what do you think is going to be the effect downstream on, community colleges, working class campuses? How is this going to have an effect?
Absolutely. It's going to have a really chilling effect. We've already seen that in Ohio. Certain state legislatures that are MAGA influenced, like Ohio's, have really stepped up this bills, SB1, to make sure that the universities, the public universities, are not woke, as they say. They're really in requiring them to allow for white supremacist ideas and white supremacist practices to take hold. So if this can happen in Columbia University, to a private university with a lot of money, and they own half of Morningside Heights as real estate, it can happen to public universities even more easily, unfortunately. And I think Columbia University has, even though it does have a lot of power, independent of government, it let itself be a product, a tool of the ruling class by its business model. So the government, by threatening to take away these federal funds, really does have some influence over what happens in Columbia. Not every university is kowtowing to the Trump demands. I know the president of Wesleyan University in Connecticut has really spoken out against it, and other university presidents are speaking out. And of course, there are institutions or organizations like the American Association of University Professors and the ACLU that are all behind, protesting Mahmoud Khalil's arrest and the silencing of academic freedom on campuses. So there is a pushback. And by the way, there's a pushback right now going on in Prospect Park. People are gathering at Chuck Schumer's office or home to demand that he not take the steps that he's now promised to take. So, so there's pushback happening on different levels about different issues.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's an important contribution there. Scott, earlier you had sort of mentioned that this is part of a broader attack on education altogether. And I read this Heritage Foundation policy paper last night, which sort of drove me insane because its whole point was that we need to shut down higher education so that women stop going to school, so that we'll be encouraged to start procreating at 18, as opposed to what they are stressing out as being something closer to 30 on average. Which I found really, really shocking. I hadn't seen that, oh, we need to destroy higher education to try and bring up the birth rate by subjugating women out of the Heritage Foundation before. But there are other reasons why, right? That this could be part of a larger attack on education. Why is it that Donald Trump, who has an obsession with MIT, what's his name? JD Vance went to Yale. It's not as though these people aren't somewhat enamored with higher education in their own way, but why is it that there seems to be this attack on higher education specifically? How does this relate to like a more to like the working class, the offensive against the working class more generally?
So I think that it's not, I would call less an attack on higher education than an attack on the independence of institutions of higher education, because you know you and Anita and Rosanna have all brought out like the amount of money that pours into these campuses, and that comes from some from the federal government, but less and less of the total share, but also from corporations and from extremely wealthy private donors. Just 1 second. To give you an idea,
Oh, good.
these are folks that will think nothing of writing a check for several $1,000,000 in an alumni weekend, and they expect to have control of universities for that. That's what we saw with before Trump was elected around Harvard with Bill Ackman's kind of offensive against Claudine Gay, who was president of Harvard at the time. So the demand is not just to reshape higher education along these incredibly reactionary, fascistic, patriarchal norms, but also to ensure that it's totally subject to the whims of private capital, which is really the core of fascism, right? To make sure that there's no barrier between the whims of the ruling class um, and the working class. That's it. Thank you.
For sure. For sure. And we love Little Comrade. Thanks for joining us today, Xavier. Rosanna, you had spoken earlier when we started the show about how this sort of thing has happened before. We're not strangers to this kind of activity. For some people in this country, it's shocking and it's new, but this is something that specifically the Communist Party has dealt with before, people being deported. Uh-oh, I think we just lost Rosanna. Um, I'm going to go ahead and pivot to Anita then. Got so basically this is not something that's new. Oh, Rosanna, did you hear what I was saying? Okay, I'm going to start from the beginning then. So basically, you had said earlier in the show that the Communist Party is not a stranger to this kind of state repression. That even though for some Americans this is new and shocking, and it's very shocking, that this is something that our party specifically has had to deal with before. Could you share a little bit with our viewers, a little bit about that history, as well as how is it that we were able to fight back, and maybe what we would do to improve upon our fight back now that we have that kind of historical digestion process?
Well, unfortunately, I don't know a lot of the details, so that I would encourage folks to read up on it. It's the committee of what is this, the Un-American Activities court that happened. All I know is that several of our members were persecuted. Some of them, our members had to go in hiding. Some were jailed, and put in the worst prisons, the most dangerous. I remember uh, Gus Hall talking about how he was put in Leavenworth. Leavenworth at that time was like the most dangerous prison, and he was put, I believe he was put even with one of the worst prisoners, thinking that that was going to affect him. But he stood strong. Same with our comrade Henry Winston, who, in spite of the fact that he lost his eyesight, came out of prison saying, I may have lost my sight, but I haven't lost my vision.
Oh, I think we might have lost Rosanna. Okay, I'm going to pass the question also to Anita and to Scott if you want to share a little bit about the history of our
It did
party
take
having.
a
Oh,
toll on many people.
thank you,
Am I
Rosanna.
frozen?
You were frozen. It's okay. We're
Sorry, did I
gonna.
freeze?
It's okay. We're gonna pass the
Yeah.
question now to Anita and to Scott so that they can share a little bit about what they know regarding the party's history and how it is that we can fight back, as well as maybe what we could do to fight back in this era. What might be different? Go ahead, Anita.
Well, yeah, thank you. I also am not an expert on that. I know we've looked at the House Un-American Activities Committee activities in Ohio as well as other places. But what was really, it was a matter of just speech. There were ideas that by predicting the um, uh, downfall of capitalism and predicting that socialism would emerge victorious, they characterized that as a violent, advocating a violent overthrow of the government, which was as far from the truth as you could get. They were talking about the government and our political system and what is the best way of organizing ourselves to meet human needs. And they were jailed for this reason. And as Scott said, some people had their passports rescinded, and also, just they were fired from their jobs. I mean, it was a huge uh, the whole McCarthy era of taking away people's rights because of their speech. So it is something that we have experienced before, and maybe Scott has some more to say about it.
Yeah, Scott, how do you think we could improve on this whole fight back going forward?
Oh, well, I was just going to say that this Anita referenced the McCarthy period, and Rosanna referenced the McCarthy period and the savage repression that our party and people suspected of association with our party uh, was faced with. It had a huge negative impact on the quality of life of the working class as a whole in this country. It was part of weakening the union movement in limiting its militancy and in pushing it in a direction of narrow sort of labor management cooperation. Um, it was part of breaking any kind of it was a terror tactic to chill and close down any space for protest, and that's what we talk about and have talked about in terms of the process of a fascist takeover. It's the narrowing and eventual elimination of any sort of legal space for dissent, for fight back, and I think people are very alarmed because the abduction of Mahmoud Khalil, who was a nonviolent activist for simply exercising his constitutionally protected rights, it doesn't look. It's hard to imagine something more fascist looking than that, and they just did it, right? So this is a very dangerous situation, and we all have to be out for it.
Yeah, 100%. And something that I think we discussed a little bit in the run up to this show, and Anita kind of touched on it briefly with her comments about free speech or First Amendment protected speech, is there's this question of green card holders, of permanent residents, right? I remember when Jamal Khashoggi was butchered in an Istanbul consulate by the Saudi government. his body parts smuggled out in suitcases. A journalist for the Washington Post, who was also a permanent resident. And I specifically remember when Donald Trump was asked about this during his first term, he said, oh, whatever, he's a permanent resident. Like, not my responsibility. He's not even a citizen. To have a journalist like this assassinated. And so I'm wondering, where did they get off? Where did these people get off thinking that, a permanent resident doesn't have rights? A permanent resident has privileges, right? And those privileges, like for instance, being able to engage in First Amendment protected activity, can be revoked by these rat-faced freaks like Stephen Miller. What's going on there? I thought that everybody, no matter who you are in the United States, if you're here, that you're allowed to do something like engage in First Amendment protected activity. What's going on here? Are they trying to change the definition? Are they trying to say that, oh, no, you don't have those rights anymore? These are privileges that, Donald Trump in his king-like capricious manner can just sort of decide to revoke unilaterally. What's going on with this? I know none of us are constitutional scholars, but I'm gonna toss it to Anita first. Anita, what do you think is going on here?
Thank you. Yes, we do. The Constitution is very clear about this, and it has been upheld by the Supreme Court in previous decades, that if you are subject to the laws of the United States, if you can get a parking ticket here, then you have the same rights and that other people in the United States, that citizens have, to free speech and freedom of religion and freedom of assembly. All of those constitutional rights do apply to people who are just here, whether they're here illegally or here as visitors or here as tourists. They all have those rights, and that's been upheld by the Supreme Court. But of course, the Trump administration is challenging all kinds of things that have been upheld by the Supreme Court in the past, and we'll have to. Part of this fight is going to be a legal fight, I'm sure. We have, but what they're trying to do is really limit the fight on the streets. If you're afraid to go out, even that letter to Colombia insisted that that Colombia should have rules about wearing masks at rallies. It's just outrageous that they think they can dictate to a private university or any university these kind of rules about what disciplinary action should be taken and what the rules of protest should be. It's just mind-bogglingly outrageous.
Right. Scott, this tension of rights versus privileges, like how is it that we're figuring that you could somehow separate a First Amendment protected right from, how is it that you can say that that's a privilege now? Like, again, we're seeing this go through the court system. We're seeing, obviously, the whole community has been in motion. You have people who wouldn't necessarily agree with the protests that are going on at Columbia come out and support Mahmoud Khalil specifically. A lot of even Jewish organizations are saying, not in our name, like, don't use us as a scapegoat to take away rights. But even though they're moving through the courts, there's also this assumption of, well, you know what, the law doesn't really matter anymore. I guess they can just go ahead and disappear you and deport you for any reason. What is that sort of Rubicon that's being crossed there when it comes to rights,
So I think this question of rights is a really interesting one, and privileges, because fundamentally this administration does not recognize rights at all. And we saw this even in Trump's first term. How many times did he talk about people that he didn't think should be citizens? People like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, AOC, women of color, naturalized citizens, people whose parents were immigrants. How many times do you talk about them not being grateful enough, right, for what they received in the United States? There's this whole idea that everything that we don't really have any rights, that all we have are privileges, that we need to be grateful and loyal to the government, to the Trump regime, to the capitalist class, to whoever, for graciously bestowing on us. That's not what rights are. Rights are things that we win in struggle. We claim them, we organize around them, and we create them for ourselves. And they exist for us whether power likes it or not, right? That's so this idea, this chipping away at the notion of rights, saying, oh, for this person, it's a privilege. Oh, they're not grateful enough. Oh, you have to earn your rights. No, no, that's all of that is the road to fascism. And we reject it entirely.
Yeah, 100%. You know, one of the things that I keep thinking about um, with this whole situation of the Trump administration chipping away at our rights, at the legal system, et cetera, is that, you know, it's sort of like how Colombia is just rolling over, right? Or how some people would say that people like Chuck Schumer are just rolling over. Um, if you roll over, then it's not going to be good. As we can see from the case study of what's going on with Columbia University right now, caving into a bully, trying to appease a bully, right, is not going to work. What we have to do is we have to stand up. We have to make these calls. We have to get in the streets. We have to let our unions know. We have to let our family members and our friends and everyone else that we know that these are our rights, right? Because if we ourselves start to treat our rights as privileges, then we are going to see our rights get taken away at record speed, right? If they can do it to this guy Mahmoud Khalil, then they can do it to all of us. That's been our whole point. That I think was like the real basis of the McCarthy era, of the Smith Act, of, you know, people getting deported, is that if it can happen to them, then it can happen to us. That's why we see them picking on Colombia, because Colombia is the most elite, the most expensive, the manufacturing of ruling class ideology happens at Colombia. If it can happen there, then of course it's going to happen at your local community college, right? If they can't stand up against it with all of the money that they have, then of course it's going to happen all the way downstream, which is why no matter where the fight is, we should be getting there on the front lines as comrades, as the party, in order to fight back against this. Otherwise, as you know, Comrade Eric Brooks just said, we have to be in a consistent struggle for our rights. We have to consistently fight for them as our rights and not turn them into privileges, not comply in advance, as people are saying nowadays. Rosanna, I want to give you the last word since you were gone for a little bit. Is there any kind of advice that you could give us about defending our rights and in this coming era?
I think the most important thing is that we have to stand strong. We have to, it's going to be difficult, but if we don't stand strong, it's going to be 20 times more difficult because we will lose and we will see just such horrendous tragedies. And even if you think it's not going to happen to you, take a look at the federal workers, take a look at the postal workers, the teachers. I don't think they ever had a thought that their job wasn't as secure as uh, they were under threat in any way. They've never been under that kind of threat, and look at what's happening to them right now. So I think that it's a good example to take a look at, and don't think that it cannot happen to you, even if you voted for Trump, even if you agree with whatever they're doing. They're still going to come after you because you're working class. You're not one of you, unless you're a billionaire that's going to give a bunch of money. They'll come after you if they find that that they want to. So, but we have to stand strong, and unity is so key. Let's do it together. We can do it together. We really can. And we have to, stand strong in that sense. Thank you. I'm sorry for the signal.
No, it's all good. We're so glad that you could join us at the end. So thank you so much to all of our panelists, Rosanna, Anita, Scott, and Lil Xavier. We really appreciate you joining us this week. Remember, you are able to tune in and watch us live every Friday at 10:30 in the morning on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Twitch as well. Sorry, I'm so old, I don't know about Twitch that well, so I keep on ending it with Twitch. But you can follow us on all these platforms, and we really encourage you to please like and subscribe on our YouTube channel so that you will get notifications as to when we have new content, and you can tune in. And don't forget to also share with your comrades. I would just like to thank everybody once again. Encourage you once again to please call your senators today to make sure that they vote no on cloture and no on this MAGA budget that they want to shove down everyone's throats. I don't know why Chuck Schumer just feels like he wants to torch his legacy at the end of his career like this, but people are going to primary you, Chuck. You can't get away with this forever. Just be sure to call them, even if they're not answering. Keep calling, send emails, etc., so that they know where we're at on this. And so thank you very much again, everyone. Until next week, stay strong, stay safe, and stay in the fight. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, Taryn. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Taryn.
Bye, comrades.
Bye.
Thank you.